Have you ever wondered how our body cells communicate? This is a question that has intrigued scientists and researchers for years. The answer lies in a fascinating process known as cell communication. This process is critical to life itself, allowing cells to interact and function in a coordinated manner. One key player in cell communication is the membrane potential. Imagine a city where messages are passed between buildings in the form of electrical signals. In the same way, our cells use a similar method of communication, and that's where membrane potential comes into play. It's like the electrical charge difference across a cell's membrane, and it's vital for the transmission of these signals. Membrane potential is like the language of cells, enabling them to communicate and coordinate with each other. It's an intricate and fascinating process, one that's essential to our understanding of how life functions at a cellular level. So, let's dive deeper into what membrane potential is and how it works. So, what is membrane potential, you might ask? Well, let's dive right into it. Imagine a bustling city, full of people moving in all directions. Now think of those people as ions, and the city as a cell. The traffic of these ions, their distribution and movement, is what we're talking about when we mention membrane potential. Think of it this way. In our cell city, we've got different types of ions, each with their own charge, either positive or negative. These ions aren't evenly spread out. Instead, they are more concentrated in certain areas, creating an uneven distribution across the cell's membrane. This unevenness, or gradient, is the foundation of the membrane potential. Now let's introduce two key players that influence this ion traffic: the diffusion force and the electrical force. The diffusion force is like gravity, pulling ions from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. It's a force of nature striving for balance. On the other hand, the electrical force is like a magnetic pull, attracting oppositely charged ions together and repelling like-charged ions apart. So if we have a positive ion, the electrical force will push it towards negative areas and away from positive ones. Both diffusion and electrical forces are acting on our ions simultaneously, like a tug-of-war game. This interplay decides whether the ions will move, and if so, in which direction. However, the membrane potential isn't just about ion traffic control. It's also a key driver of cell communication. You see, when an ion moves across the membrane, it changes the overall charge. This change, or signal, can trigger other cells to react, facilitating communication at a cellular level. So in essence, membrane potential is the force that drives cell communication. Now that you understand what membrane potential is, you might be wondering why it's so important. The significance of membrane potential goes beyond just the scientific term. It's the underpinning of cell communication, a vital process that keeps us alive and well. Think about it this way. Our body is like a vast city, and cells are the inhabitants. To function efficiently, these inhabitants need to communicate, and membrane potential is their language. It's like the Morse code of the cellular world, allowing cells to send and receive signals. This dynamic process is particularly crucial for the nervous system. The difference in charge across the membrane is what allows our nerves to transmit signals, helping us to sense the world around us, react to stimuli, and even remember this conversation. Without membrane potential, our cells wouldn't be able to communicate effectively, impacting our overall health. So isn't it fascinating how something so tiny can have such a colossal impact? So let's quickly recap what we've learned today. The term membrane potential refers to the electrical charge difference across a cell membrane, essentially the voltage of a cell. This potential is created by a difference in concentration and charge of ions on the inner and outer sides of the membrane. The two main forces driving this process are diffusion and electrical forces. The diffusion force is determined by the concentration gradient of ions, while the electrical force comes from the uneven distribution of charged particles. These forces act together to influence the movement of ions and ultimately determine the membrane potential. The importance of membrane potential is far-reaching, particularly in cell communication. It plays a vital role in nerve impulse transmission and muscle contraction, to name just a few. Remember, understanding concepts like membrane potential can help us appreciate the complexity and beauty of our bodies. So keep exploring and keep learning.